That was so pretty. It's so pretty. It's so good to be with you guys. How many of you out there hiked today? Who hiked? Aren't the mountains of Colorado amazing? Amazing. Okay, so just a little poll here. How many of you are mountain people? Like when you see the mountains, it just stirs your soul and makes you so happy. Okay, so how many of you are beach people? Like when you see the ocean? Are there any plains people, like people that like the flat plains? A few. I am most definitely a beach person who somehow got transplanted to Colorado. So 17 years ago, my husband and I moved here with 3 of our 5 kids. We had 2 more here, so I have 2 twins that were born in Colorado, and it is really funny that my 3 oldest kids all long for the ocean all the time, and then my 2 kids that were born here love the mountains. But the Escobar family, in our family, the joke is that we still always bring the beach here, and we're the ones who wear shorts in December, flip-flops, get sent home from school, you need to wear long pants, and so for us, the beach is our home, but the mountains store our soul, and we're really happy to be here. And I'm so happy that so many of you get to appreciate it for this amazing week. One thing that feels really clear to me is you guys have a lot of amazing energy. And And one of the parts that I love about being around a group like this is just remembering how much hope there is for the future, for the world and for the church. And that you really are the hope of the future, and there's no pressure or anything, but it's really true. And we all know what's happening in the world right now, that there's so much division, there's so much brokenness, there's so much struggle, and we need you to be ambassadors of peace and to change the world so that people could feel the touch of Christ and be transformed. But the reality is, from way back from the beginning, this was always going to be a struggle. And my husband and I, we have been involved in all kinds of different churches over the years. I was not raised as a Christian, and in fact, being here makes me long that I had a place like this when I was in high school, the beginning of my college years. But I did come to faith kind of slowly and surely through some interactions with some different friends, went to a vacation Bible school and accepted Jesus, but it took me many years before I really understood what that was. But despite all the different twists and turns that our faith has taken, there's one thing that is a thread that runs through it all, and that is that faith is a struggle. That faith is a struggle. And the definition of struggle, I really love this definition. In Webster's, it just, the definition just says it's contending with opposing forces. That struggle is contending with opposing forces. So there are all kinds of forces working against all of us at all times. And we're going to have to reckon with those as people of faith. I wanted to open up tonight. I co-pastor a faith community in North Denver. So we're just about an hour south of here. It was a beautiful drive today, just looking at the mountains and remembering what a beautiful place it is to be. And the faith community that I co-pastor, we planted it 8 years ago. It's called The Refuge. And I loved Emmett's amazing little intro. I mean, he just asked me a few questions, and that was brilliant, what he came up with. But the truth is that the Refuge is a mission center and Christian community that is really dedicated to being a safe place for struggle and being a safe place to live in the tension of a lot of differences in our own experience and in the experience of others and in our relationship with God. And at the beginning of every gathering that we have on Sunday, so we're a mission center. We have people coming in during the week for love and for care and for resources. We're right next to a food bank. And a Habitat for Humanity restore, lots of community and lots of connection. But one of the hardest pieces of our work is holding all of our differences together in unity. And so one of the things that we formed together as a community was our invitation to community. And we read it every single week that we're together on Sunday evening at our gathering, and we refer to it a lot. So I thought it would be fun to read that here as an invitation to all of us. This is what we say. The Refuge is a mission center and Christian community dedicated to helping hurting and hungry people find faith, hope, and dignity alongside each other. We love to throw parties, tell stories, find hope, and practice the ways of Jesus as best we can. We're all hurt or hungry in our own ways. We're at different places on our journey, but we share a guiding story, a sweeping epic drama called the Bible. We find faith as we follow Jesus and share a willingness to honestly wrestle with God in our questions and doubts. We find dignity as God's image bearers and strive to call out that dignity in one another. We all receive and we all give. We're old, young, poor, rich, conservative, liberal, single, married, gay, straight, evangelicals, progressives, overeducated, undereducated, certain, doubting, hurting, thriving. Yet Christ's love binds our differences together in unity. At the Refuge, everyone is safe, but no one is comfortable. Everyone's safe, but no one is comfortable. And I will just say that sometimes I long for comfortable. I do. It's like in all of us, we want things to be easier. That high wire. How many of you guys got that pit in your stomach? When I saw him walking, it was one thing. But then when you saw what he was walking across, it was a whole other thing. And the reality that we're all going to struggle with as people of faith is that we want to squeeze out the struggle and make things more comfortable. But a walk of faith requires that we stay uncomfortable. And I always come back to Jesus' first and greatest commandment. That all of the law was summed up, and it was love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor. What's the last part? As yourself. And so often in so many communities, we talk about loving God and loving others. Loving God and loving others. And we forget that little thing at the end. It says that we love others how we love ourselves. And that's why it's so important to wrestle with things that are going on in our own heart, in our own lives, and how we interact with other people, and how we interact with God. And that all of those things will always be a struggle. When I first came to faith, one of the things that was the most tricky for me is that I kind of thought when I was entering in, things would get more comfortable. I came from a broken home. My mom was a single mom. My dad was and is an alcoholic. They were divorced. She worked really hard to keep the lights turned on and us raised up. It's very difficult, sometimes still in our family, that I have chosen this path of following Jesus, and many in my family haven't. We're learning to live in the tension of our differences. But one thing that was really clear is that when I turned my life over to Jesus, I was hoping that I would become more comfortable. And actually the opposite thing happened. And so I kept waiting for things to be easier. I kept wanting things to kind of be clearer and simpler. And what I kept learning is that it was a lot more complicated than that. So when I think of loving God and loving others and loving ourselves, something that I think is really important for you guys to really ponder is that they're all tied together. So you can't separate it out. This is my God part, this is my other part, and this is my soul and myself. They're all tied together, and they always have been. And that I had a tendency in my faith, when I was younger, new to the faith, that what I really wanted is things were either all good or all bad. And so I tried so hard to be a good Christian. I worked so hard at it. And so then I would be feeling okay, and some of that tension kind of and struggle sort of let go. And then I would make a mistake. I would do something that I shouldn't have done. I would say something I wish I hadn't. I would think really bad thoughts in my mind and in my heart. And then, instead of accepting God's grace, I would swing to the other side. And that was that everything was bad. So I was on this pendulum between good and bad. And I think that happens a lot in our human experience, that we like to split things. So when it comes to others, the same thing kind of happened for me. And I was focused on, because of judgment that I felt towards myself, messages that I had about not being good enough, not being spiritual enough, not being strong enough, not being put together enough, not being smart enough, whatever those things were. Then I would tend to put that on other people too. Because how we love ourselves is how we interact with other people. So then I was harsh and critical with other people also. Then related to God, I was either really close to God and I was feeling him and I was there, or he was so far I didn't even know where he was. And I didn't know how to live in the tension of both of those things together. So it was either good, bad, strong, weak, dark, light, or in or out. So the passage for tonight that was read earlier in the book of Acts really points to this idea of in or out, and a split that we all have as humans of wanting things to be super clear and super comfortable and super black and white. And in the passage, I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but I want to come back to it, that the reality is in the early church, when it was being formed and the Jews had been converting to Christianity, they had all that stuff from the past, and food was a big deal to them. It was a big deal. It was a violation. It was a way of saying, this is holy. This is how we keep ourselves holy. So the thought of mixing clean and unclean was the biggest violation possible for them. And so when they came to Peter and they're complaining, how can this be? How could you be mixing with them? And Peter shares the strength. And the dream that he got was there wasn't just this or this, in or out, clean or unclean, good or bad. But there were these other different expressions. There was food that everybody could eat, and that the barriers between them could be broken with Christ at the center. With Christ at the center. But the part that I want to remind you guys is how hard that was. It was so hard to embrace. It was so foreign to them. They wanted it to be so clean and simple, in black and in white. And I think that the lesson that I have that comes from that passage and that comes from my own experience is that so often we think that unity is uniformity. That true unity is uniformity. So it's when everything, we're kind of with people who believe the same thing or think the same thing or want the same thing or desire the same thing. And true unity is living in the power of our differences together. And that Christ's love really binds us all together in perfect unity. In my story of trying to squeeze out the bad feelings, what really ended up happening is that I couldn't. They didn't go away magically, and I could only feel the good feelings. It didn't work like that because it doesn't work like that. They both exist in the same place. In the faith community that I co-pastor, it's a really fascinating community, and I think in so many ways you would be challenged by it because we hold in tension so many differences together. So there are people who make $600 a month on Social Security disability and people who make $6,000 a month in a really high-profile job. There's people who don't have past a sixth grade education, and then there's some that have gone to graduate school. There's some that I feel very, very close to God and are on fire for God, and there's those that feel very far from Him in this moment. There are those who love, love, love to read the Bible, and then there are others that struggle with it and aren't sure what it means. There are some that feel really certain and clear about their faith, and there's others that have many questions and many doubts. And always in that moment, our tendency is to want to squeeze it all out to one direction or to the other. That we want to do what those early criticizers were doing to Peter and saying, but what about? But what about? But what about? Because I want it to be black or white. Doing good and feeling connected to God. Or he's gone and I don't know where to look. And that we have a tendency as humans to go back and forth that way. So one of the lessons, and it is really interesting, I love the word journey. I love that you guys are doing this together, that you are on a journey together. So last night, you talked about being called. And that part of being called is that we come to show up in all of our strength and in all of our weakness, with all of our struggles and with all of our good stuff, with all of our questions and with all of our doubts. And that the work of our lives is to wrestle with that struggle and not expect it to be gone. So a principle that I learned several years ago, it's been probably 8 or 9 years ago, but it shifted things for me in a really profound way. And I think it points to this passage. And that's this idea of paradox. And the definition of paradox is that two contradicting things can exist in the same space. Two contradicting things can exist in the same space. So for me, when you think about what I was saying about the things that I always struggled with, I was either doing really well in my life or I was doing not so well. I was either loving people fully and all the way, or I wasn't doing it at all. I either felt very close to God or far away. And the reality is that both of those things can exist in the same space. And that was really hard for me because I wanted it to be this way or to be that way. In our faith community, the person that I co-pastor, we have very a similar heartbeat. We love Jesus. We love living out the ways of Jesus together. We love pastoring this community together. But we also have some differences that are sometimes really hard. And it's really easy to want one to be the way it is and the other to have this be the way that it is. And one of the things that we're learning is that they can exist together even though it looks like they hit each other in a really tender place. And our tendency has been for the last 8 years to run away from the call and not engage in the struggle. But what I keep learning is that in those places of struggle is where the most transformation happens. It's where the most transformation happens. So I want us to think for just a minute about this idea of paradox, that two things can exist in the same place related to our relationship with ourselves, what's going on in our heart and in our soul, our relationship to others, in how we're engaging with our neighbor, and in our relationship with God. So I think a lot of you guys have your program from this weekend. It's got the spiral bound and all kinds of things. So if you don't, you can pull that out, or you can pull out a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. You just need a little white space that we can work with. And then grab a pen. You can't do this on your phone. You can only do it with pen and paper. So when you get your paper and you get it all ready, take out your pen, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to draw a big circle. Then when you've got your circle on your page, I have to say, this fun little iPad whiteboard up here makes me want to draw a lot of things, not just a circle. But put a big line through your circle so that that half is split. So kind of as we talk about this, I want you to think of the left side of your circle as kind of things that we might deem negative. Okay, not positive, and that's our judgments that we place on it. We're not going to evaluate all those, but to us, it just feels on the negative side, okay? And then the right side is on the positive side. So you can kind of think of it as dark or light or bad or good, positive, negative and positive, whatever works for you. But the left side is the negative. The right side is the positive. So now what I want you to do is we come back to this idea of ourselves, others, and God. And this tendency that we have in us, just like the people in this passage, that we're complaining about things not being this way, needing it to be that way. I want you to think for just a minute about yourself, where you're at right now, in your journey. And I want you to think of something that feels kind of negative about yourself, that's hard, that you struggle with. And I want you to write it, and don't look at your neighbors, just focus on what you have in front of you. And write that at the top on the left-hand side. And so mine, a message that I often struggle with is that I'm not enough. Something in your life, in your story, that just feels hard and that you kind of wish wasn't there. I wish this message wasn't there, but it is. Now I want you to think about the other side, and I want you to think, what is something really good about you? What is something that you're like, I am this, I am caring, I am compassionate, I am kind. I'm strong, I'm brave, I'm a survivor. And write that on the right-hand side. So you don't have to show yours publicly like I do. You can keep them on your page. Now I want you to take just a minute, and I want you to think about someone in your life, some other person that you struggle with right now in some way, shape, or form. It could be a specific person, or it could be a group. It could be somebody that acts like this or like that. And I just want you to write on the left-hand side. They are whatever, difficult. That's the word that comes to mind for me. In the work that we do at the Refuge, there's just a lot of really hard stories, and sometimes it's just difficult. Frustrating. Hard to be around. I don't know what your words are, but just write them on your left-hand side as you think of others in some way that you struggle with. Now I want you to think about the right-hand side. And I want you to think about something that you're really grateful for about that person or about that group. Something that you see and it's like, that is really good, that is really beautiful, that is really strong. And write that there. So many of my friends at the Refuge are really brave. They stay in hard situations over and over again. And then the last one, and I want you to think about this. So much of these experiences is listening for God, getting honest about our relationship with God, opening up some space in our spirit to hear from God. And so I just want you to think on this third movement, what's kind of hard about God for you? What's just hard sometimes related to God? And the part that I'll put is that sometimes God feels confusing to me. I see so many injustices, I see so many hard things, and I just get confused on where he comes in and changes things and what's us and what's him and his work in our lives. And so I'm going to write for me that God is sometimes confusing. And then lastly, I want you to go back to that right side. And I want you to think of the same thing related to God. In that, what's something you're really grateful for? That you know is a deep truth about God, that you want to remember and that you're thankful for, that that's in God's character to be. And for me, it's just that God is so faithful and full of grace. So I just want you to take just a minute. I want you to look at your circle. And I want you to think for a minute how easy it is to just look to the left or to just look to the right. To just look to the left, and that's all we see. And then to kind of wake up, and then we just look to the right, and then that's all we see. And that as humans, we have a tendency to want to do this always. That's what the early church wanted to do. That's what we see in the world right now, is that we want things to be this direction or that direction. And here's what I believe is the struggle that we're all going to have to live with and will be one of the biggest struggles of our lives. And that is to erase this line that's in the middle. I can't erase it with a pencil, and a lot of you guys have pens. But if I could, that's what I'd want to do. I want to cross out that middle line. And I want us to see that all of those things can exist in the same space. So I can feel not enough, and I can know that I'm a caring person. I can be journeying with people who are so difficult. And I can be journeying with people that are so brave. I can feel confused and confounded by God. And I can be so grateful that he is faithful and he is merciful. And so the challenge in our faith is to live in the tension of all of these things together. And as you listen to the call, and that's why what I said at the beginning is so true, you have a bright and amazing future ahead of you, and you are going to shape Christianity, the people that you are in relationship with, form the church. You will be formed, and you will participate in forming others. And the hardest thing that goes along with that is that we will have days that we doubt. And that's all we'll see. We can only see that. I can't tell you how many times I've thrown in the towel. How many times I can only see the left of myself or others or God. And then things will turn and you'll be on fire and be really excited about what's over here, and then it'll feel good. Then when something goes wrong, we'll want to swing back over here. And the best gift that we can give, not only to ourselves, but to the people that we are called to love and in our journey, is to erase that line. To heal the divide and to live in the tension of all of those things existing at the same time. And when we can accept that in ourselves, And in God, we can accept it in others. So that means that the person next to you, you might not see eye to eye on so many things, but you can love them. They can eat food that you don't eat. Way back when. And you can still love them because Christ's love binds us together in unity. They can struggle and they can be doing well at the same time. We can struggle and be doing well at the same time. And that the piece that we need to remember is that all the forces of the world will be to squeeze out this and this. That's what that passage points to. And Christ is always, always trying to bring wholeness and healing. And remembering that unity is not uniformity. It's holding the space for paradox, embracing our good and our bad, our strength, our weakness, our beautiful, our ugly, and all those things in each other, all the things in the people that we're in relationship with and that we journey with, and certainly in our faith. So I want to come back to the end of that passage. And in the New Living Translation, here's what it says. They have a shift. They say, we can see that God has also given the Gentiles the privilege of repenting of their sins and receiving eternal life. But I really love the way that the Message version says it. It says, hearing it all laid out like that, they quieted down. And then as it sank in, they started praising God. It's really happened. God has broken through to the other nations and opened them up to life. God has broken through to the other nations and opened them up to life. Living in the tension of paradox in our own life, in our relationship with others, and in our relationships with God will always open us up to life. It's hard to do. But when we try and squeeze things over to this side or to this side, life is killed off. And love is killed off. And our responsibility as followers of Jesus is to keep practicing loving God, loving others, and loving ourselves, and being loved by God, and being loved by others, and loving ourselves. So the struggle of our lives, and what I hope that a little piece is, I would love for you to come back over time and think when you start to swing here or swing there in your own heart, in your own story, or in a story that you hear from a friend, or in your faith, that you keep remembering that both of those things can live in the same space and everything in between. That all the animals are clean. And that we serve a big God, and I'm so thankful, who keeps opening us up to life. So my heart for you, my heart for me, I'm on this journey too. The older I get, the more I realize that no matter how clear or called I feel, there will always be tension. And the tension is what transforms us. So let's pray. Jesus, thank you that you open us up to life. Thank you that you understand our struggles in our own lives, in our faith, and in our relationship with others. Help us embrace the good and the bad, the dark and the light, not only in ourselves, but in those that we're in relationship with. Help us live in the tension of our differences. Help us embrace paradox and accept the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, the different, the same. Strengthen us, encourage us. Show us what it means to love you, to love others, and to love ourselves. In Jesus' name, amen.